You can fish in the canal. You can boat in the canal. But it's pretty much a given that you don't swim in the canal. Every fall, New York State comes through and they empty the canal of the water, and we get to see what actually lies underneath that murky water down at the bottom of that ditch, and it's not pretty.
JR and I found this really awesome cabinet during one of our picking adventures. It's old like the Erie Canal. I could picture it as a console behind a sofa, at the end of a bed, or as a cabinet under a TV. My husband and I have grown up, raised our kids, and now do business in an old historic canal town. And well, there are many local stories and legends about this canal, stuff we don't want to tell our kids, so they aren't tempted to swim in that murky water because you never know what lies beneath the surface. Like the canaligator and the tale of the guys who bridge jumped into a floating cow, and sightings of sea creatures that came across from oceans afar, slithered through the locks, and made their way through the canal, Loch Ness Monster-like. I'm going to use some older, first-generation IOD transfers and apply them under Debi's DIY paint to create a chunky, layered, textured look for this cabinet.
One of my very favorite jobs that I ever had when I worked in Medina was working at the public library. So one day, this guy walks into the library. Yeah, it's sounding like a guy walks into a bar sort of joke, but yeah. So this guy walks into the library. He had been fishing in the canal. He had all of his gear on, and he walks in carrying a 5-gallon bucket.
After giving this piece a really good cleaning, I sanded the top of it. I wanted to reveal that beautiful aged plank wood finish.
Wake up, honey, I made you breakfast. Fresh coffee and
This cabinet has old paint and a slight old odor, so I put a coat of Debi's DIY Salvation Solution over the whole piece, even on the inside. I didn't want to deal with 100-year-old bleed-through and smells coming up through that paint.
growing up is just a trap.
He walked right up to the desk with that bucket and said, "Ma'am, I wonder if you could help me to figure out what kind of fish this is." I came from behind the desk and I looked in that bucket. "Sir," I said, "you caught yourself a piranha."
You know how our paint can get a little thick around the top of the jar and on the inside of the lid, you know, when there's not much left in the jar? I don't want to waste one bit of that wonderful gunk, so I scraped it out and smeared it onto the surface. I used tarnished pearl, faded burlap, and apothecary. I scraped and smushed that dried, thick paint, building up layers that are going to be revealed later, after I apply my finish coat of paint.
I'm not great at identifying fish. I couldn't tell a bass from a catfish, but I knew enough and had seen enough documentaries to know that that was definitely a piranha. You go fishing for carp and you pull up a piranha. Go figure. You never know what lies beneath those waters.
For the next step, I'm adding these 2 medallion transfers. They are from the IOD first generation products. Yes, I am applying them before I add my finish coat of paint.
A piranha at the library causes quite a stir. Local newspaper reporters came. The police came. Patrons who were in the library went home to get more people to come back so they could see the piranha.
Using Debi's DIY White Swan, I'm going to apply my finished coat of paint. And yes, I'm going to paint over the transfers.
It's just a big fat trap. I take pride in never working a day. Can't see the use of it anyway. Who can think I'm such a load of
And
crap?
there was a piranha
Growing up is just a trap.
at the end of his pole. I know my surprise when I looked in that bucket and saw the piranha. You never know what lies beneath, right?
Okay, this was what was really fun about working with Debi's DIY clay-based chalk paint over the IOD transfer. Using a damp cloth, I'm going to gently wipe away the paint from the transfer, leaving just enough. And then do some wet distressing to reveal all that chunky goodness, all those layers that lie underneath the finished coat of paint. You just take that damp cloth and wipe it away until you get the effect you want. It's funny that even though I put the transfer there and I put the paint on it, it always comes as a surprise to me when I reveal that transfer under the paint. After a few days, when my paint has completely dried, I will use Debi's DIY clear wax. I'll apply it over the entire painted surface. The next day, I'll buff it to a very soft sheen. I'm using my Paint Pixie buff, but you can also use a soft old t-shirt. In order to protect that beautiful wood plank top, Debi's DIY Big Top, I'll apply a few coats. It's an awesome water-based product, which is also non-yellowing. Creating layers and surprises under Debi's DIY paint is fun. I love the finished effect of this. The poor piranha didn't make it. He died a quiet death right in that 5-gallon bucket, surrounded by patrons and villagers, children and reporters, police and library staff, adding yet another story to the underwater legends of the Erie Barge Canal. You can find all of the products that I used for this makeover at ellenjgoods.com or in our brick and mortar store in Medina, New York.